Not all entrepreneurs want to be out there, carrying the bag and making calls. They need to have an awareness of what's going on. One of the things, just coaching one owner on recently is pipeline management, which is looking at and saying, what deals do we have? Where are they? When are they likely to close? Do we have enough? Do we have too many?
Hello and welcome to the Service-Based Business Society podcast. I am your host, Tiffany-Ann Bottcher. If you're ready to scale your success, grow your business, and live that entrepreneurial life, click subscribe because we're about to get started. Welcome back to another episode, guys. Today we are talking to sales expert Greg Nutter. Now, sales is the lifeblood of any business. And you may find that kind of interesting for the operations finance person to come right out and promote the sales team. I remember back in my time in corporate, there was always this kind of back and forth between the ops and finance team and the sales team, because ultimately the sales team was a little more fly by the seat of their pants, a little bit more cowboy, as I used to call it back in the day, selling things that didn't exist, just getting it done, making promises to customers. And then it was the operations, finance people that would be like, hey, but we can't do that. And what about this? And what about that? And so there was always this kind of back and forth. Leaving the corporate space, though, and starting my own business now almost 4 years ago, I realized that if you can't sell something, you don't have anything. It doesn't matter how amazing your product is. If people don't know it exists, if you can't connect with people, if they can't understand what you do for them, ultimately your business is dead in the water. And as an introvert, as a non-salesperson, that's hard for me to admit that, hey, this is a super important skill. Greg breaks it down in really easy to understand steps. He talks about things that are maybe not so intuitive. He talks about the process. He talks about what really can make the difference. So it doesn't matter your industry. It doesn't matter where you are in your business journey. It doesn't matter. Sales is so critical, because if we cannot influence someone to understand our idea and how it benefits them, our business can't exist. It can't grow. It can't do these things. So, while Craig has worked with some incredible sales teams, he also offers some incredible tips and value for everyday business owners who maybe aren't ready to hire a sales team yet, who are their salesperson. So with over 35 years experience, Greg has worked with a wide range of companies to develop strategy. With over 35 years experience, Greg has worked with a wide range of companies to develop strategies, programs, processes, tools to grow revenues, enter new markets, increase sales consistency, maximize selling investments, develop skilled sales process and people. This is so incredibly important to growing businesses in any industry. So super excited to have Greg Nutter here on the show. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thanks, Tiffany-Ann. Great to be here.
So such an important topic in business, sales. A lot of business owners, if you say what would make the biggest difference in your business, they say more sales. I need more sales. I need more customers. I need bigger sales. And so, when your information came across my email and I got reading a little bit more about your book, I thought, Greg is a great person to have on the show, because we can learn a little more about how can we generate those sales, as people who maybe don't have a full sales team. And so why don't you talk a little bit about how you got into this industry and a little more about yourself?
Sure. I'm a career salesperson. Actually, my degree is in computer science, but I discovered I preferred talking about technology more than doing it. So, worked for Xerox for 10 years, was a consultant for a number of years, 8 or 9 years. After a few big companies, worked for small companies. And I got to see the challenges that little companies have, which is very different than the scale of, the big Xeroxes of the world that have lots of people and lots of processes. And so work with 3 or 4, putting in sales processes, hiring people, developing the sales infrastructure. And then about 15 years ago, I went out on my own and started consulting. And I did a lot of the big companies, Microsoft, Hewlett-Packard, NCR, SAP. But I also did a lot of companies that were as small as 2 people or 20 people. And again, you'll know this, Tiffany-Ann, is that they're what they're trying to do is the same, but their challenges, which are mostly resource related, skills related, process related, compounds the issue.
100%. I think that, a lot of business owners start with a great idea, and those serial entrepreneurs typically have lots of great ideas, but actually taking it from, hey, I have an idea, getting it to the point where we can actually sell it, because that's one piece of the journey. And now we're selling it, and then we need to sell enough of it to make some actual money. And then we got some operational challenges with actually executing and implementing that. And so, if you think of those big organizations you mentioned, I always find that, in a big organization, there's so many pieces, so many moving pieces, but one thing can fall apart. And there's so many other things going on that sometimes those little tiny pieces can often be hidden in a sea of things that are going right. And in a littler, smaller business, maybe a startup, maybe in the first few years, that type of thing, some of those pieces, can really cause a problem very quickly.
Absolutely. Like big companies have lots of resources, and if something falls through the crack, there's a million people to plug the crack.
Totally.
One thing that you and your listeners will know, that service-based businesses are particularly hard to scale. They're hard to scale for a couple of reasons, but the two that I think of most is the product is hard to scale. It's not that repeatable. It's often customized, very customized. You just can't, unless you're doing a software as a service business, it's very difficult to scale. The other thing is the selling services is more complex than a product. It has more nuance to it. Therefore, it's often more complex. It's harder to differentiate. So scaling services businesses from a product or from a selling standpoint is complex. And the key, and I look at some of your publications, and you capture this really well. The key is two things. One is it requires process, and it requires some skills, and particularly some, not just, hi, how are you? Here's my product skills.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think one of the, there's service-based businesses that the owner is the service. So, this is your photographer. Well, it's really hard to scale a photography business because you're one person. And unless you hire another photographer or find a way to sell that time or, add additional support in the office, that is a really difficult business to scale. And really the only way to make more money is to charge more for the same service.
Yeah.
Then you branch into services where you can add additional team members. But I really feel like that step of scaling in that business is that you have to ultimately be able to replace yourself doing the service so that you can now grow and run your business, or you need to hire someone to grow and run your business so that you can continue to lead a team in the field or wherever it is.
Yeah, there's three critical components to scaling a sales capability, revenue generation capability. The first is good sales processes. So how do we prospect? How do we manage deals? How do we, put together proposals? How do we implement? How do we onboard, et cetera? The second is good sales management processes. And that might come as a surprise to some entrepreneurs is, don't I just hire somebody and they get deals for me, right? And the third key is consistent execution of both. And I work with a lot of small business owners. In fact, I worked recently with one who does engineering services. They create robotic systems for car manufacturers. And he's an engineer and was heavily dependent on an external sales agent who was about to retire. So he called me up. We went out, we ran a workshop on the book. And what he realized is that he was delegating all of this sales process to the sales agent. So he got a deal or he didn't get a deal. It was just kind of the luck of the draw. But once he understood the process of selling and the process of managing the selling, he was in control. He then had control of his own destiny as to whether he got a deal or how many more deals he got. And that's very empowering for business owners to say, hey, I have my finger on the pulse of revenue generation.
And I think that ultimately that is the piece that causes business owners the most stress, is not necessarily having, and it almost being kind of the luck of the, did a sale come in? Well, I hope. And so, you have times in your business, maybe it's seasonal. And so you think, well, now it's super busy and I maybe don't want to be selling as much, but the sales are just coming in and you're struggling to keep up. And then other times in the year where it really dries up and you're just hoping that either an old customer comes back or they recommend a friend. And so you're really kind of having these, highs and lows. And as a business owner, especially once you have a team, Now you're thinking, I have to keep those people working. I've trained them. I don't want to lose them. So I want to keep them working. And so now there comes this stress and anxiety of, oh, we're not booked out. How do we get booked out? Do I need to drop the price? Am I overpriced? Is somebody else undercut? It's this kind of rotation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a couple things that sees on there. The first thing is that a lot of your entrepreneurs who are subject matter experts in their particular field don't think they need to sell. And I push back and I say, yeah, you do need to sell. The problem is what's selling? And selling is, in a business environment, is influencing on someone on the need to change your perspective, change your situation. And so if you are trying to convince someone that your service is good, your recommendation is the right one, to differentiate between you and other service, you need selling, which is influencing skills, right? And without that, you just talk about your product and cross your fingers. So whether or not you've got the word sales in your title or in your job description, if you need to influence people on the merits of change, then you need to have some cursory selling experience. The second thing is that, you talk about a great point. When's the deal coming in? Where are we? Are we gonna starve in the next quarter, right? And while not all entrepreneurs want to be out there, carrying the bag and making calls, they need to have an awareness of what's going on. One of the things, just coaching one owner on recently is pipeline management, which is looking at and saying, what deals do we have? Where are they? When are they likely to close? Do we have enough? Do we have too many?
Mm-hmm.
And if you have no awareness of that, then you are doing exactly what you said. You're just crossing your fingers, and you can't scale crossing your crossing your fingers business.
No. And so, my history, you talk about kind of the more tech side in your history. And so, I come from a data analytics, accounting, finance, zero sales. And so, I had just finished my MBA before I left corporate. Turns out once you're your own boss, nobody cares. And so, I finished so I've got years of school. I've been in the corporate space for 13 years. And, I get out and people, I needed to leave for a variety of reasons, but it comes down to what am I going to sell? And, realizing that ultimately, until you can sell something, you really can't do anything, because it doesn't matter how great your product is. It doesn't matter how amazing your service is. It doesn't matter if you could change someone's life until you can actually get them to give you a shot. It ultimately makes no difference. And so, I leaned really heavily into the sales side when I first started. And I was like, okay, I know nothing about this, but I am an intelligent person. And I need to learn. I need to figure this out. And I often thought back, because in my corporate space, I had two business partners, and one was like the sales guy. And he and I were always butting heads, because I was like operations finance, and he was like scatterbrain scales. Oh, I sold this. I'd be like, we don't even do that. He's like, but I sold it, so we got to do it now. And so we were always butting heads. And I remember as my business started, thinking, gosh, I wish I paid more attention to what he was doing, because it could really help me right now. And so, it's when you're a business owner that doesn't have a huge team, you often have these different sides where you've got your operations side, or the part that's got to actually go and do the service. That's like, hey, we can't do that. That's too hard. So you got the sales side who wants to sell. And when you're one person, you've got this kind of conflicting piece that instead of two people sitting around a table debating whether or not we should have done this, and well, it's already done, so we got to figure it out now. Now you're one person who's like, I don't really know if this is a good idea. And should I have sold this? And should I have sold it for more? And so that, added to the volume stress, you've got this kind of piece where really sales and actually the execution are really two separate roles in a bigger organization, and for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I'll comment there, I talk about it in my book, is that what people think is selling intuitively. They think, well, this is how you sell, is how you sell in a B2C environment. Right? You talk about your product, you ask for the order. In B2B, it's a lot of the strategies, the tactics are very counterintuitive. And so lots of smart people who start great businesses come at it from an intuitive way, and they get it wrong, right? And so having some kind of guidance on here's the right way, here's the wrong way is really, really critical. The second thing is that you get a lot of entrepreneurs who, I just want to hire a real hot gun, give them a comp plan where they can make, $1 million and have them run, right? Well, that's really hard to do. A couple of reasons. One is the really good salespeople, they don't want to work for a little company, right? They want to work for the big fat companies that got big President's Club trips and benefits, and they can get promoted to the top, and they don't want to work for a little company. The days of just saying, here's a comp plan, hiring a guy, giving him a comp plan and saying, go, it just doesn't work. So you're unlikely to get the top of, the top performers. So you got to have some process in there so you can see what they're doing, understand what they're doing, coach and, monitor what they're doing. Or, you're just, again, crossing your fingers.
And ultimately, any part of business left with crossing your fingers, doesn't matter what it is, it's just ultimately not the best process. Because a lot of, and every so often, I always find it interesting to watch like Dragon's Den or Shark Tank. Because every once in a while, you see these people who have like what you think is like not, and they talk about their success and they talk about their business, and you're like, that's not really a thing. And they've had wild success. And then you see other people who you're like, that is super cool. Maybe the actual framework around it is not great, but what the idea, the concept is great. And so, there's these different pieces. And so then you kind of go to, well, what makes one successful versus the other and whatnot. So you talked about kind of knowing what works and knowing what doesn't, and sometimes it being counterintuitive. So what kind of advice can you offer in terms of, what are some of those pieces that are counterintuitive, but really are the difference makers?
Well, I like to say there's kind of five key things that sellers often get wrong. The first thing is they forget what selling is. Selling is not talking about your product and asking for the order. Selling involves three things: understanding someone's perception of their situation, influencing that perception so that they'll change, and ideally change by buying your product, and then messaging back based on what they've told you. So it's not talking about product and asking order, influencing. Second thing is leading with product, right? Which is kind of what we talk about prospecting. Here, I got a great product. I got a great company. We do a lot of work for ABC and DEF company. Well, the reality is no one can. People in business don't buy products. They buy solutions to problems or ways of capturing opportunities. And the reason why that's important is unless you frame your offering in that context, one of those two contexts, no one cares. Right? I don't need an accounting service. Oh, you may not. But we found a lot of companies who don't have solid bookkeeping and account management, don't know where they are month to month, and get surprised with not being able to make payments. You think that's a problem you might want to avoid. So now if I put it in that context, it's like, oh yeah, I don't want that to happen. Great. Let me tell you about it. All right.
Right.
So talking about product. The third thing, I guess, which is really a big, leading with a sales process, which is what a lot of junior and sometimes senior salespeople do, rather than following a buying decision process. So the fact that I made a call, asked you a few questions, put in a proposal, you think, the next step is ask. But instead, you need to look at where that person is in making a buying decision. People go through very predictable stages, 4 or 5 key on coming to a decision. Actually, they make it not just in buying, but a lot of big decisions. They go through the same 4 or 5 steps. So you need to understand where they are, and based on where they are, it tells you what to do. So if someone has made no decision around buying sales training, buying accounting services, then to put together a proposal is a waste of time. Right? So do they see a problem? Do they see the value of fixing it? Have they thought of the alternatives? Are they looking at different alternatives? So where they are tells you what. And the last big one, I guess, is a lot of people in sales, they don't plan. And we talk about 4 key processes that you need to have in place, which are really require planning, which is prospecting, opportunity, pipeline management, and call management. And just it is works sometimes, but it's not a good formula for scaling your business.
Right. So Let's talk a little bit about that kind of follow-up process. So, we're kind of talking about getting that proposal out. And I think that process, of course, is very different for every, business and industry in terms of what's involved. And I think that for a lot of business owners, they can do some kind of sales call, whether that's on the phone, in person, over Zoom, whatever that is, and ask enough questions to put together some kind of proposal. And I find that whether it's in B2B and B2C, which we'll talk a little bit about the differences in the follow-up process, you have a great chat with the person. However, you feel like you're really connected. You had a great, you were like, yeah, the person's like, yeah, send that over. We're going to get started. And you send the proposal and crickets. Now, I will say that every once in a while, those people come back around when you expect them least. And we're like, yeah, I'm ready to it's like a year later. And they're like, yeah, I'm ready to get started. Let's go. And you're like, hello, you're back. Okay. But what is what do you talk about in your book or in your experience that to take that from great connection, sent the proposal, nothing?
Yep.
What happens? What's next?
Yeah, we talk about that quite a bit. So at the core, we talked about influencing. What a sales is, and there's two ways to influence. There's the easy way that's not very effective, called telling. You should really have an accounting service. You should really train your sales. Not very effective. The effective way is asking good questions that cause people to think, maybe I should have an accounting service, right? So asking questions is how you influence. There's 4 key categories of questions. The first one is called facts. How many people do you have? What are you spending each month? Then there's questions around problems. Hey, your costs are going up. Is that a concern? Then there's importance. How big a deal is that? Is that going to put your business? So here's what facts. Asking fact questions allows asking questions around problems or opportunities allows you to asking questions around importance, which is urgency or impact, allows you to motivate. So if you had a great call, we got along great, hey, we got an opportunity there, and all you got was then it's, hi, Tiffany-Ann, did you get my proposal? What do you think? Can you call me back? It's like, oh, I got better things to do than call you back, right? But if I said to you, Tiffany-Ann, we had a great call. You told me about the problem of this escalating cost and how it might impact your payroll in a few months. That sounded pretty, be great if we could reconnect so we could get this solved for you. I need to call back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So too often we go into a call and we get just enough information, but not enough information to sell or motivate. And without that, people just...
So now I'm a person who enjoys the sales process, but doesn't like the cliche sales. And so when someone on the phone starts asking me those kind of questions, I am immediately I know it's coming back around. It's like, oh, and it feels so robotic and so predictable when they're like, oh, and how much do you think that problem is costing you every month? And how many months do you forecast that problem will go on for? And you're like, yeah, I can do that math. Thank you as well. And so, I find that sometimes in the sales process, or people will say, you must meet this many times before we'll talk price, and you must do this and you must do that. So what do you say to those who kind of push back against something structured? Because we kind of say intuitive isn't necessarily the best. And so, but sometimes it goes the other way and it feels robotic, and it feels like pressure in the questions. You haven't even started applying the pressure, but you can feel like the fact collection for the pressure is coming.
Right. Good selling, B2B selling, is like being a good consultant, right? Whether it's a good attorney or any kind of service provider. Your job there is to diagnose whether or not somebody has a problem, whether it's severe enough, whether you can fix it. If they don't, hey, it was great spending time with you, but we don't have anything to offer you. So it's a consultative process. And you need to make people aware of that's what we're here for, right? It shouldn't sound like a sell. But when people do, and particularly when you're asking sensitive questions, there's a couple what we call sales plays that one of them is the most, if you're getting pushback, is that, use the what's in it for them, the with it, right? Hey, Tiffany-Ann, that, this is a bit of an intrusive question, but the reason I'm asking this, a quick assessment of whether or not we can add any value. And, I really appreciate your time, but I don't want to waste any more of it. We just do a little bit of that. So, and the what's in it for them needs to be about you, not me. Well, I really need this stuff because my boss wants me to come back with it. Well, that's not a what's in it. Tactic, which I find works really well, is what I call share. So instead of saying, well, how much your widget, and if you're asking question after question after question, right, then it becomes tedious. But I understand you might be reluctant to tell us the cost of your attorney services, but we normally find that they charge between $400 and $500 an hour for this. Is that what you're seeing? Or are you seeing a lot different? So if I come and share what I've heard from other customers, then it kind of disarms the person by saying, hey, other people are giving this information. This is reasonable information. I should at least, validate. Yeah, it's actually a little higher than that. Okay. And then you're done. So it should conversation that's consultative, not an interrogation. And whenever you get one of the most powerful things in a sales call is, hey, here's what I want to do today. Want to understand a little bit about your situation, particularly in this area, understand if there's any challenges you're dealing with and whether or not we can. So what I'd like to do is, probe on this, and then we come to agreement if there should be next steps. Would that be okay? And if I tell you what I'm going to do, why I'm going to do it, where we're going, you're more likely to say it. But if I just launch in with 100 questions, like, where's this going? Oh, right. Then you're likely.
Yeah, it does start to feel like when you mention interrogation, if you're like, going down the list, you're like, hey, question. Yeah, question. And before you know it, you're like, okay, well, I've collected all my information. And then there isn't really a dialogue. There's no real connection building.
The other thing that's really important, whenever you have a sales call, consultative sales call, there should be a what's in it for the prospect to have that call. What do they get out of it? And in your intro statement, here's why I think this call might be valuable. And if you don't have a what's in it for them to get the call, you're probably not going to get it. And if you don't deliver on that during the call, you're not going to get another one. It's fine. I'm here to gather some information, but this needs to be a valuable exchange for you, or you're not.
And so, if we take that now to B2C, what would you say some of the biggest differences are for those who are thinking, oh, I don't sell B2B, and so maybe it's not, the discussions are less formal?
The key differentiators B2B is complex. B2C, generally the product that you're buying is pretty straightforward. It doesn't have a lot of complexity to it, or I can Google it. Decision process is pretty straightforward. There's one, maybe two people. There's not a formal process. So it's more gut feel and a more, so the B2C selling cycle goes like, it's called the two-step, right? You give information and then you ask for the order or the logical next step. And if someone says, I'm not really that interested, then you say, well, can I give you more information here? And then if you get more information, then you can ask for the order again. So it's this if you've ever been to a selling, that's exactly the way they go. Give you more. You really need to have this. Do you want to buy it tonight? No, I'm not interested. Let me tell you why it's more important. And it goes around and around until they try. So B2C is gut feel. There's a higher requirement to be a nice, fun, engaging person in B2C because the deal happens fast. So you need to develop trust and confidence. B2B, the product and has more complex, and the decision cycle plays out often with a lot of people over a lot of different interactions. So being nice and fun often is not a formula. It's being more methodical, consultative. So the B2C cycle is actually a three-step. Ask, looking for problems, because people don't, our companies don't buy products. They buy problems or opportunities, right? So I'm going to ask and try to create awareness. And then if there's no awareness, I suggest, well, I understand why you might not want an accounting service. Can I give you some ideas why some of our customers found it really valuable? And I suggest in a very respectful way, and then I ask if they would agree. If they don't agree, they don't agree. I could suggest something else. If they don't agree, they don't agree. So move on, right?
Right.
And then the last step is I recap. So what you've told me is this is important, this is important, this is important, this is, and you'd really like to fix that. The challenge is a lot of people in I talked about intuitively sell using a give information and ask for the order or ask for the next step. That two very active in.
Yeah, it's interesting because you were talking about kind of where they are in their process. And so at one point early on in my business journey, people were reaching out and, hey, I can get you 100 leads and this kind of thing. And so, you're starting out, you can get 100 leads. That sounds great. Like if I get on the phone with 100, so far, if I get on the phone with X number of people, I'm going to close X number of deals. Well, now if we say now I got 100 calls, perfect. And then you think, well, but those 100 people, sure, they showed up on a call, but they were not the 100 people. They were, they were people that, hey, well, I'm thinking of starting a business. And so I had this idea. And so next spring, my Aunt Sally and I are going to do X, Y, Z. And so then we would need bookkeeping. We would need bookkeeping then because, and you think, okay, it was really nice to meet you, but this is not. And so, it needs to be the right people and then these processes. But, if you're consistently not meeting these, you're not solving these problems, then perhaps the leads are also not the best quality leads.
Yeah, I've worked with a few lead generation companies, and the latest one now is, you've probably seen this. Somebody connects with you on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Then they endorsement. Greg is really good at sales training, whatever. And then, hey, Greg, we do lead generation services, right? The gap is I didn't have a problem, right? And so they're pitching without understanding whether I.
Mm-hmm.
And so in prospect, the analogy I like to use is it's like dancing. You're going to do two things. You're going to sort of ask someone, are they interested in dancing, and are they able and willing to dance? So are you interested in dancing? I don't talk about my product. What I do is hey, you know what? Hey, Tiffany-Ann, I know a lot of people struggle getting their initial accounting system set up. Not sure if this is something that you're right, but if you are, I'd love to share how other people are handling it. Done. Greg, we have no need in that area. Perfect. Next person, right? Next person. So I suggest a problem or opportunity. If there's interest, I have a lead. If there's not.
Right. Because unless you have, your service that solves their problem, if there is no problem, then ultimately you really aren't going to ever close anything because there's no mutual relationship there.
Yeah, I like to say, particularly B2B, without the context of a problem that someone has said they want to solve or an opportunity they want to capture, discussion of a product, feature, company qualifications makes no sense. Who cares, right?
Right.
It's only in that context that discussing the product feature makes any sense. That is a starting point for a B2B sale. Tell me you have a problem that I can solve. And if not.
Right. So tell us a little bit more about your book. Where can we find it? What kind of information is in there? What can we expect?
My book is called P3 Selling, The Essentials of Sales. It's a fairly comprehensive book that talks about the strategies, best practices, processes, and a couple tactics on how to do well in B2B sales. And I wrote it after, delivering a lot of sales training on other people's concepts that people weren't using, reading a lot of books that people weren't using. And my last fractional VP of sales for a company, I was looking at these people that were 30s, 40s, 50s, and they were still making the same mistake. So I wanted something that was easy to understand, easy, that people could take their selling to the next step. And it's great for owners to pick up and go, that's a couple good ideas that I can take. So we've sold a couple thousand in almost 20 countries. It's currently 4.9 out of 5 on Amazon, 4.7 in Goodreads. So I've got some really good feedback on it. It resonates with people. It was written, you know, in the last couple of years, not the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years that a lot of sales books has. And it's really resonating. So, and we also run a workshop for people who want to come down and like apply it in their business. So we've done that. I'll tell you an interesting. I had a call last year from a owner of a law firm who wanted me to run a workshop on the book. And they go, law firm? Never worked with a law firm before. They don't have selling in their title, but they need to influence prospects on why they're different, why they're better. They need to influence them on a particular strategy, on a different approach. And so he wanted his attorneys to go through foundational influencing training. So it's been, so you can get it on Amazon, Kindle. If you want to read more about it, you can go to p3selling.com. And
it's interesting. One of around maybe 1 year into my business, someone reached out, they were doing some work for a school paper and they were talking about, what do you feel like the most important skill is to be a business owner? And so we're talking and we're going through and they're asking me all these questions about my education and all these things. And they said, what do you think the most important skill is? And I said, sales. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, unfortunately, unless you can sell your idea, it's a non-starter. So, when you're talking about, most people wouldn't think of lawyers as salespeople. And, a lot of business owners would never say I'm a salesperson and right. All of these types of things. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter role you're in. If you want people to change, make a decision that grows your business, it really comes down to that word influence that you mentioned, that is super, super key. And some of the leading books, in the scope of influencing people and whatnot, they are very, very old and very valuable, but not very, very old. And so love to get some fresh takes on the topic.
Yeah, a lot of people think of 3 parts of sales: the prospecting part that nobody likes at the beginning, the closing part that nobody likes at the end, and the cringeworthy behavior like that, right? But real B2B selling is consultative, and it's the creating awareness, influencing change, influencing perspectives. And it's a really high value that, entrepreneurs really need to take those great ideas that they have and get people to go, oh, yeah, that's pretty good.
Absolutely. So, Greg, if you had one tangible tip for a business owner to take and implement, lots of great value today, but if they had one thing that they just take and just implement, it would make a difference in their business, what would that be?
We talked about it a lot, but I'll change your perspective in almost all of your communications, whether it's your website, your call, whatever, to talking about solving problems and capturing opportunities and not about product and features. And that one change puts you, instead of your arm wrestle for a product or feature or price decision, you're on the same side of the table with a client solving a problem. And that changes your perspective, their perspective of you, of your company, of the value. I've worked with a lot of small companies and I look at their website and it's all product. Change that. Start with, what problems do you solve? What opportunities do you allow people to capture? And if they're interested in that, they'll look more about your products, right? If not, they don't care about the products. So I think that's the one pivot that particularly entrepreneurs and new business, because they're so caught up in the product, they love the product or the service. They know how great it is. But if they want other people to understand how great it is, they need to approach from the context of here.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Greg, where can people connect with you, follow you, learn more about what you do?
The place. So I mentioned p3selling.com tells you a lot about our book and our training, our programs, our podcasts, such as your. It's Greg-Nutter. So connect with me. I write a blog sometimes once a week or every other week, or send me a note, Greg at P3Selling. I'm happy to
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your valuable tips. Sales really is the lifeblood of any business. It ties them all together. It doesn't matter the industry. If you're here to make money, at the end of the day, you're going to have to sell something along the way. And so it's such a valuable discussion for people in all different phases, all different industries. So thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to click subscribe, like, comment below, and share the episode with a fellow entrepreneur. If you want to take our episodes on the road, they are available everywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much. See you next time.